Hi, I'm Jenny Hutchinson, and let's meet and learn a little bit about our artist, Grace Hartigan, and our artwork titled White, to get some creative sparks going for our creative challenge. After moving to Manhattan in 1945, Grace Hartigan, through the social scene of the Cedar Tavern, became part of the inner circle of the abstract expressionists. While art history credits Hartigan with being a second-generation abstract expressionist, she is actually part of the initial launch. During this time period, in the early era of her career, Hartigan signs her canvases George Hartigan, as she was following in the footsteps of 19th century writers George Eliot and George Sand. These are actually two women, named Mary Ann Evans and Aurora Dupin, who you've probably never heard of. Both defied the odds of the Victorian era and took the name George to ensure their writing was taken seriously. Thus, Grace Hartigan, as a female artist, was vying for her career to be deemed significant among the many famed men of the abstract expressionist movement, so she also tried this route. Eventually, Hartigan begins to part ways with the abstract expressionists by incorporating representational imagery back into her paintings. It is this iconic shift that will define the oeuvre of her painting career, and she will be recognized as one of the pioneer artists of the feminist art movement. And she is credited with being a precursor to pop art. With innovation, foresight, and sheer will, Grace Hartigan overcomes the various myths that plague the intent of painting in the contemporary era. Now let's take a specific look at Grace Hartigan's artwork titled White. At first glance, you might say it's just a bunch of lines, but let's break it down a bit more. Take a minute and take a closer look at what characteristics you notice first. Is it the color? All the different lines? The texture? Or is it the movement? How our eye is led to move across the canvas in all different directions? How about the color? It's not just any color. It's specifically the primary colors of blue, red, and yellow, plus black and white. This is important because they are called primary colors because they cannot be mixed from other colors. They are known as pure colors. This is significant in reference to the abstract expressionist movement because one of their tenets is to embrace pure thought in an effort to emphasize individual emotion. How about the lines? Most are all about the same width and length. There are some rogue marks here and there, but for the most part, they're pretty consistent. This attribute leads our eye around the artwork. But some of this can be or lead to some off-putting impressions as well. This leads to another attribute of the abstract expressionist movement. The action or effect of the overall scene has the ability to tap into the subconscious. The combination of marks can seem or feel quite chaotic or overwhelming. Others may feel unmoved or even bored, and that is because the consistency of the size and shape of mark over the entire canvas becomes mundane. You really have to look to see more subtle changes. Now let's talk a little bit about the texture. If we look even deeper, you will notice that some of the lines have a very rugged or textural look, and that is applied with the effect of a dry brush technique. And that's when the artist uses a brush with very little water added to the paint, and then it's wiped onto the dry surface of the canvas. No additional water is provided. The other texture of the mark is softer and applied through a technique called wet into wet. And that's when more watery paint is added into or onto a wet surface. Now let's consider how our eye is led around the canvas in terms of its movement. The action appears to be consistent, but the direction of the marks shifts. Each mark has a different direction. And as we stand back, we can observe through the combination of marks that there is actually a more radial or circular effect. That is because the black marks gather mostly at the edges. Then the more colorful marks surround the middle. And then the crescendo of this piece occurs at the very center, which also connects with our artist's title of this artwork. There's a diagonal white mark that occurs at the very center. It's important to note here that a diagonal mark is one of the most active visual effects an artist can include in an artwork. It's the ultimate eye candy, and subconsciously attempts to attract your eye to this point. So there you go. So while for many people, abstract art may not be their taste, for the reasons I've outlined, that's exactly why your 5-year-old could indeed not create this artwork. Well, they could, but it wouldn't be embedded with the same intention of rules, implicated specifically by the artist. A lot of non-objective art, meaning there's no representational image represented, is about a set of rules an artist utilizes to design their artwork with, and as viewers, we are invited to take our eyes on this journey with them. The only other problem here is it may be difficult to tap into an artist's visual language without knowing what to look for. So here's our next prompt to consider. One way to unleash our creativity is to correlate marks, color, and texture to human emotion. And with that freedom of expression, other possibilities start to emerge. One of abstract expressionism's most interesting art-making tactics is how artists create mark-making systems that align with internal emotions. While there is much evidence to point to that Hartigan's artworks were inspired by emotion and reaction to written work like the poetry of Frank O'Hara, many of her fellow expressionists were also finding inspiration from music and then through their own movement. Grace Hartigan said, quote, "Somehow, in painting, I try to make some logic out of a world that has been given to me in chaos." This is an especially relevant idea to consider, because with the world at such unease, one can entertain the musings of an abstract expressionist artist and find exercises like creating a Grace Hartigan-inspired artwork to release tension or anxiety, or may assist in connecting our minds with the emotion we are currently feeling inside. Now let's explore some possible ways to create and consider the potential meanings of marks. Marks can be straight or curvy. A straight mark may signify something as confident, whereas a curvy mark could be deemed flippant or emotional. Marks can be long or short. Long marks can feel reliable or stable, or even drawn out, whereas short lines are curt and get to the point. Lines can be thick or thin. A thin line can portray a strong reaction or emotion, whereas a thin line can suggest something more slight or subtle. Lines can also be broken or continuous. Broken lines have the potential to narrate a story. Their position and orientation can portray a start, middle, or end, whereas a continuous line is ever shifting, unpredictable, or fluid. The direction of a mark, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, all have different connotations. A horizontal mark is deemed to be stable, serene. That's why we like landscapes or sunset. It's not just the beautiful colors, it's also the horizon line. Vertical lines are domineering, strong. So it's not just about the size of a building, it's the direction of the movement and the emphasis of growth that it implies. Diagonal lines are active, unpredictable, and attention-seeking. We just can't take our eyes off a mark that's moving in a diagonal direction. It draws our attention like a moth to a flame. Our brain is wired to be interested in it. Marks can also be soft or textured. In that respect, we're talking about the edges of a mark. So a soft mark feels quieter, whereas a texture mark feels loud and possibly even volatile. Try creating a series of marks that you feel represent your current emotion. Another exercise to try if having difficulty is to listen to music and see what marks you create inspired by the music. Or just move your body around. Put the piece of paper or painting on the ground. See how you can move and create marks in a way that expresses your emotion. Or try making the marks in reaction to a poem or other written item you may find inspiring. Well, this exercise showed us different ways to consider creating your own visual arts vocabulary using line. This creative challenge invites creativity in all forms. So how can Grace Hartigan's artwork, White, or some of the ideas concerning mark, inspire your own creative work in visual art, writing, performance, music, or dance? Remember, there's no rules to this challenge other than inspiration from Grace Hartigan's artwork. So have fun, and we're looking forward to seeing what you come up with. On behalf of everyone at the Hyde Collection, we'll see you soon. Bye.